Nice one. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining our virtual seminar. These are exceptional circumstances. Normally, we should do this in a big town hall meeting or in a seminar venue, but obviously still bound by the different COVID measures. We have to do this virtually. It offers good opportunities because, on the other hand, it's easy to bring together a nice panel like we have today. So I would like to welcome the panel and give you the opportunity with a small introduction. I'm going to start, ladies first, with Pia, please.
I knew this would be coming. So, hi, my name is Pia Strebler. I'm the People Solution Manager Benelux at Bridgestone. So actually, I'm responsible for the payroll, personal administration, recruitment, and the facilities. So that's my scope within Bridgestone.
Fantastic. Christophe? You have to unmute, Christophe. You're still on mute.
There we go. That's a beginner's mistake. Good morning again. My name is Christophe. I'm currently working at Grant Thornton, which obviously is an audit, advisory, tax and legal accounting firm worldwide. I'm director of business process solutions, and at the same time, I'm a full-time CFO.
Great. John?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks very much, Guy, for having me. I'm the CEO of Telenet. I've been here for 7 years. I came here from Australia, so I got a bit of an outside-in perspective sometimes. And very excited to be having this conversation because it's very topical. We've had an accelerated learning experience over the last 3 months, and excited to see where it takes us.
Thank you. Steven?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm focusing my work on the customer experience. I'm doing research about the link between technology and customer experience, adding the human touch to that, and I write about that, I speak about that, and that's what I try to do for my customers.
Thank you. Roel, please.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure to join. I'm Roel. I'm one of 3 owners of Velten & Company, and Velten & Company is a boutique consultancy specialized in and founder of activity-based working, so a flexible and a time and place independent work style.
And Gideon?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining, everyone. My name is Gideon van der Burg. I'm responsible for Leasement in the Benelux. And for those who don't know Leasement, what we do, we measure workplace experience, and we used to do that in offices. And we have a data set there of 740,000 respondents. And since 8 weeks, we've been starting to measure the homework experience. And we now have a data set there of 40,000. It's still early stages, but I'm happy to share some insights from the data today.
And I would like to thank you, Gideon, for that. And I would like to ask my co-host to present himself as well, please.
Good morning to you all. My name is Wout Rommeslag, and I'm the director of the Facilicom Solutions branch here at Facilicom Belgium. And Facilicom Solutions is the branch of Facilicom with integrated facility management and consultancy.
And I'm Guy Klaas. I'm marketing director for Facilicom. Like we said, I'm gonna let Wout to do the introduction for as the reason why we're here in this webinar and what started this off. Wouter made a blog 2 weeks ago, and he's going to talk us through the little introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. Well, a few weeks ago, I wrote a blog, and the title of the blog was Higher Lower. It was a television game once at the Belgian television, and you had to guess if a number was higher or lower. And I was wondering, what will be the future of the workplace? Will there be more square meters? And there are a few arguments for that. To say there will be more square meters, you have to keep your social distance. So some real estate players are thinking that's an interesting opportunity because 1.5 meters, we will need more square meters. That's one movement. But then there are other people who are saying, there was another movement saying, no, It will be completely the opposite. The real estate market will collapse because companies will reduce their square meters because now everybody works from home. Everybody is now used to work from home. Companies had to change their processes so that people can work from home. A lot of companies invested in systems to work from home, like the system we're using today, Zoom, has an enormous growth the last few weeks. So there was a lot of discussion about it. Other people say that nothing will change. The square meters will be more or less the same because we have to keep our social distance, 1.5 meters, but a lot of people also want to come to the office. And people are asking, please, when can we come back? There are social reasons for that. People want to see their colleagues. There's a lot of scientific evidence too that things like innovation need an informal interaction with people. So the office has a use. A lot of people also discovered that working from home is not the holy grail, because maybe the neighbor has some noisy children on Wednesday afternoon and you're begging to come to the office on Wednesday afternoon, or your neighbor decides to renovate the bathroom and there is a lot of building noise, construction noise around. So you want the office as a useful space to concentrate and to work, not only the social. So I talked about it with he, and we want to discuss today what will be the future of the workplace. What is the part working from home? How will the office see the future? That is the question for today.
Thank you, Wouter. First, before we start the webinar and the conversation, I would like to check in with you guys, how you have experienced the last 11 weeks or 12 weeks. Obviously, working remotely, working from home, different circumstances. I heard Steven 2 weeks ago on Radio 1 saying I was booked up till September, going on international seminars, being on planes, on and off. And now I'm at home doing webinars for the same crowd, but from home. So it obviously impacted all of you. What's your personal feel or impact on the last 12 weeks? Before we hit off,
you want me to comment on that, Guy?
Please go.
Well, yeah, my life was usually going from large-scale event to large-scale event, and giving keynotes to broad audiences. And beginning of March, in 2 weeks' time, I evolved from a full calendar to a completely empty calendar. And not really knowing when things would be possible again. I mean, to have real life events. So I was panicking a little bit, to be honest. I was really, really worried. It was pretty intense. But then, I mean, now we're at mid-June and life is completely different. If I look to my calendar in June, almost every day I have very nice virtual events that I can speak to larger crowds than in physical environments. I have to be honest that I miss the energy of a real life event. I mean, the transfer of energy is different when you are in the same room together than now when we're all separate in our own home. But the advantages are, I mean, the impact on climate is basically gone of my life. And I reach out to more people. I can do more presentations a day. So there's some benefits. I miss a few things. And I honestly hope that if we wake up, if the dust settles, that I'm going to have some sort of a hybrid life. Part of the old one, I would like to have that back, but I would also like to keep some of the benefits that I have with my life today.
Yeah. Christophe, can you relate to that? Do you see any similarities in your way of working, or how you experienced the last couple of weeks?
I think the first month I could definitely taste the virtual follow-up. But I think that the part of the pushing on items or projects ongoing, you can do that virtually. But I definitely miss when you kick off a new project, whether on internally on the job or commercially, you miss that vibe. I think I'm gonna hook up with the hybrid version of myself and work-wise as well, as Stephen mentioned.
Yeah, John, I can imagine there was a big change for you as well, because I know you are a very visible leader within the company, and you like to engage with people and be present. Obviously, working from home for the last 12 weeks must have been a massive change for you as well.
Yeah, the last 3 months have proven that you can feel really good and really bad about the same thing at the same time. For me, you know, locking down was straightforward. We knew what we had to do. We had to shelter in place, and there was a certain amount of adrenaline associated with when we kicked the whole thing off. You know, we were all on video calls for 6 to 10 hours a day, depending on what was going on. I'm finding now that I have very much video burnout a little bit,
Yeah.
and I'm really craving, like you say, the informal social context associated with getting back physically to work. I will say that the level of complexity of starting back up is a multitude of 100 compared to shutting down. So we're well in the thick of that. But I think for the most part, there's good energy around starting back up. A lot of complexity, but I'm squarely in the camp of trying to encourage that. And whatever the new normal is, let's get to it as quickly as possible. Is my mindset right now.
Yeah. And Pia, you from an HR perspective personally, but obviously you're very close to everything that is related to HR. For you, it must have been pretty difficult as well.
Well, it's been, if I take personally, it's been a roller coaster. I have to say, actually, the workload has increased drastically. It was on top of. So anything related to the COVID and some of the measures, whether it's, towards the employees, but also towards the building, that actually increased the workload. Working from home, I've been used to do that, so that was actually not an issue. But I kind of tend to agree to some of the comments that have, those videos calls and an increase in the emails actually, because and different ways of being connected and by the employees, it's a different way of working. But if I look at me personally, it reached a point, and I'm sure other people also had, is you have those two aspects, which is one, the professional impact, but you also have this personal impact. You were mentioning you will have to stay at home, not being able to move and do what you want, and making sure that you can keep this border or this frontier between work and home, because whatever you do, you finish your work, you go down, it's private, but you don't have those buffer time. And this is something that for me, at a certain point, it started to be, where is the border? Where do we put ourselves, the boundaries? Where do the company does put the boundaries in order to respect this work life? So this is really where at some points, I'm happy that some of the measures are opening up.
Yeah.
If I take it on a personal level, in order to be able to, a little bit do more what I want to do and be a little bit more free. But I come to the hybrid, notion. I think this is something that we will probably come up with, balancing actually work at the office, because the social aspect, the interaction with the people, even informally, not only work-wise, it's really important. And this is something that I'm missing, but also the work at home. So it's something where we're going to need to change. But it was a roller coaster, I have to say, with the personal adaptation and changes where everybody experience.
Okay, thank you. Gideon, what about you?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, right? I think a lot of organizations did a perfect job in making it technically possible to work from home. So that's all working. I miss the informal social interaction with customers. And from my side, it started to look like a Groundhog Day, that every day is starting to look like the same day as before. And I've been going back to my co-working space, actually. Yeah. We have kind of another lockdown here in the Netherlands, as they say, the intelligent lockdown. But it's safe to go. I go by bike, so the travel to work is fine. It's a very spacious environment, so I feel safe. But I really needed the choice, right? So that I could make my choice based on my activities, where that would be best to go at that stage. So I try to mix home now with work. So I'm working towards this new normal, I would say, and that works good for me at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Rul?
Yeah, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So we are trainers and leading a dispersed team, and I'm responsible for a European team. We give training courses all around Europe to, let's say, managers that want to do it more virtually. But this was a strange thing. So for giving these training courses, I had to go to, let's say, France, Spain, the Czech Republic, etc. And now it all went to, let's say, do it virtually. And it certainly improved my private private life balance. But it cost me some really tough conversations with my children. So the combination with homeschooling, leading a dispersed team, and managing, let's say, the impact of COVID on Velt & Company was pretty tough.
Okay.
Well, I think if we can summarize, there are a few things that always come back. You have the work-life balance, in which the working from home can be an asset. You have the social aspect, which is an argument for the office.
Yeah.
The interaction. But also, I think there's an external stimuli that is the environment, because now we see that traffic is less. It's also very nice to have no more traffic jams on the roads, or less traffic jams. So there are several things that are finding a new balance, I think. Yeah. I think that's a summary of the introductionary question.
Yes. Now we're going to start with a very bold statement, and maybe just for this statement, I would like you to say yes or no. The bold statement is 50% of the office space as we know it will disappear. Just quick yes or no.
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 The other people?
No.
David? No.
No.
Now, I expect
Then I would say yes, but in 10 years time.
Yeah, then I would also say yes. But,
okay.
The trick is in the as we know it, right?
Yeah. So let's follow up on that, because the 1.5 meter economy, it's been pushed, especially by real estate companies, the likes of Cushman & Wakefield, CBRE. They're obviously pushing now in plans to add on 1.5 meter square to every workspace, because they want to keep their portfolio steady, which is understandable. It's a normal reaction from the market. But if we look at that and we'll translate it into more or less office space, what Wouter referred to in his blog, will it become completely different? Will it change? Will it be a more social aspect in the office, or are we going back to the cubicles? In the 80s, every office had a little cubicle. In the 90s as well. Then we changed to open plan. But I know Steven is a massive Disney fan. If you look at the offices of Walt Disney or Google, some people refer to it as a playground, which obviously it isn't. But it's a different way of working. So what's your perspective on that? Because obviously it's about money. The real estate is afraid of losing portfolio. Companies are looking at their building portfolio from a social perspective and a cost perspective. What's your view on that? Maybe we should start with Rul, because you obviously have a vision and an idea on what the future would look like in real estate.
Yeah, I do have a multitude of, let's say, opinions about that. But let's start with the basics. I think that the perspective of the employer serving well-being of an individual employee by providing them with a, let's call it a second home, that's gone. And that was the case in 90% of, let's say, demands of our clients. And I think but let's state we have participated in a scientific research in Europe that was published yesterday, so it's open for a read. And the key findings of that are the benefits of working at home, according to the majority of respondents, are larger than the cons. So it is a yes for home working, but not only for home working. And should be a combination. So based on the latest experiences, the topic of well-being is shifted to the work-life balance, as I already stated for my personal situation, and the freedom to control.
Yeah.
So people found out that being in team meetings and Zoom meetings, etc., they heard more about the opinion of senior leads, about processes, about what's going on, and not from a middle management perspective. So I would say it's a change from power to empowerment, and that's why I, as a consultant, am so excited. And of course, this would have an effect or an impact on office space, but at first it's about the employee and about, let's say, the item of trust and well-being.
Yeah, we'll zoom in on the trust and the leadership in a minute, but I talked to Steven earlier, and obviously Steven is very experienced and a specialist in user experience and customer experience. We talked about customer experience as in, if you're an employee in a company, there is a sort of experience, a customer experience as well. What's your insight on that, Steven, from let's say a customer experience or a visitor to an office space in the future?
Well, if we start with the idea of customer experience, I always play with 3 benefits that you need to accomplish. Yeah, it's faster than real time, it's more personalized, and it's more convenient than ever before. And that's what we're being trained in as a consumer. And if you look to the last 3 months, I tend to call it the biggest digital training course the world has ever seen. We've seen a sprint in experiences, both in organizations and among customers. Now, if you translate this to employees, I basically think that employees want to have the same kind of experiences when they work than as a customer. You want to have really faster than real-time help when something is wrong. You want to have it personalized. You want to have it very convenient. And I think that's really valuable as an employer to think in such a way, because if you succeed in creating those benefits, basically what it means is that your employee doesn't have to spend a lot of time on operational stuff, and has more time really to focus all their energy into doing an outstanding job where you pay them a lot of money for. So I would like to think and start with what would be the perfect employee experience. How can you reverse engineer that back, and how can you create that? And if you look at office space, it's obvious that a lot of people miss the human interaction and the creative process, the informal talks from the coffee machine to the meeting room. These things disappeared from our life and we missed them. I think the whole onboarding process right now must be really difficult. If you change jobs in between, then you feel how much you miss that informal and human part of an organization. On the other hand, there are so many benefits of working from home that it would be really stupid, I think, if we just go all back on the E40 and do 2 hours to drive from where I live, Knesselade, to Zaventem. I mean, that would be, then we would have wasted this complete crisis. I think we cannot go back to there. And again, I think hybrid will become the new buzzword, but I think in office space, it's going to be the combination of the best of both worlds, basically. But my feeling is you have to start with, what do we want to create as a perfect employee experience? What's the role that office space can play in this? And what are benefits that working from home, remote work can create for our employees? And let's make sure that they don't have to worry about operational stuff and their private stuff as much anymore.
Yeah. Before I go to John and Pia on the human side and the leadership side, I would like to bounce off a question to Christophe as well, from a financial perspective, as in auditing, and a CFO perspective. What's your look at, or your main concern, during and now looking post-corona on this topic?
Okay. Just to circle back on the first question on square meters, you probably want some numbers to hear from a CFO or literate. I think, nice. Like as Steve mentioned before, or probably all agree that home working, it will be a best practice, and a norm could be, obviously depending, we're talking professional services, not manufacturing, that 20% or 1 day a week will be the norm to work from home. So if that's a minus, if that's a minus 20 in surface, I think we'll be adding another 5% on top again, because your working space will need more, whether it's more safety and health related, or it's more comfort feeling, the feeling at home, so that we get people back in the office to talk and discuss and move projects forward. I think that's going to be a -20 +5. Cost-wise, in the very near future, I think square meters will get cheaper, because there's unfortunately we'll have a lot of closures. I think. I mean, there'll be some square meters on the market very soon. But at the same time, the cost of operating those square meters or cubicles will increase because of the need of additional health and safety that we've come to see. I mean, not everybody wants to work and with a plastic or a plexi in front of them or in between colleagues. You probably rather want some green in between than plastic. That's come at the cost, but that's an additional service to have people coming back and visiting the office. Mm-hmm. And I think Pia and also John have probably mentioned the people aspect for sure. I think there's a lot of people today that are suffering from a Stockholm syndrome for COVID, that are perhaps afraid to go back, and that's perhaps 1 out of 20. Yeah. But you need good leadership, and this COVID period or this pause definitely has set aside some leadership compared to what you call old leadership or disruptive or tech-savvy leadership. That has come to term now to show. We'll need all hands on deck from leadership and HR to bring people back in the office, not to slow down business, because in finance there's a costing side. Yes, square meters, yes, the cost of operating the business, but as much as is on the commercial side, the biggest lever, and that's for people and projects to move forward the way we were doing it, and not the way we should be doing it.
Yeah, I want to go back to the leadership and decision making, because I also wrote down a question about acceleration in digital transformation, activity-based working, agile and remote working, but it comes with leadership perspective and being agile as a company, not just in the execution of your services and your products, but also in leadership as in how to manage your company. You have to facilitate, obviously, a new way of working, not just in an office, but outside the office as well. And if I look at John and what Telenet did over the last 12 weeks is amazing, giving the Wi-Fi and the bandwidth that everybody needed to be comfortable at home and be able to do the work. That's the agile and fast moving of a big company. But John, on a leadership perspective, there must be a massive impact going back to the office within the next weeks or months. What's your look on that?
Yeah, there's no question. I certainly understand the merits of remote working that have already been mentioned. And, the level of focus, intensity, the ability to manage, quite complex fact-based programs and these kind of things in a BAU context, I think remote working is fine for, or in fact, probably better even than sometimes physical engagement. But there's a couple of concerns that I have through my lens of leading a company with a few thousand people. If the pendulum swings too far in the direction of remote working, and that's why I'm trying to get people back to work. One is, it's very difficult to curate a culture remotely or by proxy. It can't be done. I've worked for international global companies, and unless the CEO gets out of his chair in New York and flies around, it just doesn't. The connection's not there. I'm very focused on that. I think half my job is being steward of the culture and stimulating what separates us from our competitors. And the other part that concerns me is I don't believe that the virtualized meetings and et cetera, are really a platform for innovation or in change and transformation in companies. And this is something that, with the acceleration, with digital transformation and the acceleration of all businesses that we need to manage, and we need to manage that change very aggressively. I think I don't see innovation coming out of virtualized meetings. Innovation, where the spark of innovation comes from is from the interconnectivity of people and the gestalt, flow of ideas, which ultimately result in something meaningful. There are a lot of things that, I mean, imagine trying to do post-merger integration on an acquisition, without being physically present with people. I think it would be very difficult. There are many things in the change area that I just think are going to be very hard to manage. You mentioned agile, and that was certainly a huge benefit for us at the front end of this thing. We've been transforming to a scale agile operating model over the last 12 months. So we have autonomous self-directed teams in most of our organization with varying levels of maturity. And many of them, and many of the key ones, were able to adapt, without the command and control component very successfully in their particular discipline. So I certainly feel that from an organizational development standpoint that, organizations are moving towards a more agile framework. And I think this will probably accelerate that trend as well as many others.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting viewpoint. And Pia, if you look at the HR perspective, because we already touched collaboration, mobility issues, possibility of burnout. Groundhog Day was one of the things that came back. How are you as an organization and from an HR perspective going to counter that? Because I also saw a publication by Stan Bart, a professor in the University of Ghent, who said there's a possibility of missing out on promotion. There's less possibility of learning and networking by pushing remote working and pushing the virtual environment. Is that something that you keep into an account now with Bridgestone to accelerate and bring back to the office, to the work floor, basically, to counter these things?
I think that what we are going through actually accelerated the thinking around, yes, taking into account that home working works and is possible. Okay. I think definitely that will accelerate maybe the way we're working, and the interaction will be different. But looking at what our CEO Laurent Dartout actually recently said, it has brought an attention on that we might be looking at how to work the working concept, look at our working concept and integrate, I would say, the element of agile working, the element of home working, which was maybe not as present as before. So so if I look at the company, there are elements we will need to look into, and that's what we actually will do within Bridgestone Europe here at the headquarters, is looking indeed at the working concept environment, because it's true that the focus was a lot on safety, but that will still stay applicable, and the well-being. But I think the notion of interaction, networking, but the face-to-face also will be even stronger, I think, than before, because if we will allow indeed employees to be much more at home, we need to make sure that the environment in which they will be, how would I say, creates this closeness and creativity, collaboration, interaction with one another. But I think there are other elements indeed we will need to look into account now. If I look at the space, okay, yes, we're talking about 1.50 meters. Will it stay? I mean, that's my question. I mean, it's yes, we have a pandemic at the moment, but will this stay the norm or not? Because that could have a complete impact indeed on the whole setup of our offices. But also the well-being of the employee, for me, still really strong. You're talking about the groundhog syndrome. I mean, these are different elements that we will need to look into and really support the employees. And even if it's only a small percentage, if I may say, it has an impact inevitably on the whole team. We will also further, and we had started actually to look on the mobility side, but I think the home working proved to work to make sure that indeed we don't, the traffic jam will be hopefully less. But this is something that we had started to look into, but the COVID situation will accelerate the whole thinking, and we are actually about to start a whole thinking around that, but we will integrate all those different elements into account. Yes, but it's what I agree with John is, this culture impact. I think even from an HR, we're there to support. We're part of the culture. We're supporting the culture. But by keeping these people remote, we need to be all together to really nurture and embed the culture that we want to have within our company. So I think this notion of culture for me is also very, very important. So we need to, I think it's going to be a change. The way I see is that we're going to have to adapt ourselves. We had to adapt very shortly, but we will integrate some of our new way of working into the future way of working, taking into account some different norms, different aspects, but having those balanced and hybrid approach. But this is something we will look into that as an HR, and we have to, yes.
Before we jump into that, I would like to ask a question to Gideon, but I'm gonna give some information that I read about 2 days ago by our Flemish Minister of Internal Affairs, Bart Somers, who announced that they did a survey with civil servants for 7,000 civil servants, and 85% indicated they were more than happy to work from home. And as a result of that, they're now going to allow Flemish civil servants to work 2 to 3 days from home. And they're also going to push forward activity-based working and remote working for the Flemish government, which is quite revolutionary, because everybody in Belgium and in Flanders knows that the government has massive buildings filled with civil servants. And this is a massive turnaround due to the situation. But Gideon, you talked about earlier in the introduction that Leesman did has a lot of touch points and did a lot of research, whether it's in offices or now with remote working. Are any of the figures, because I can't imagine Holland being that much different from Belgium, and you're a Benelux organization anyway. Can you give us some maybe key figures or something to...
Yeah, sure. Thanks. No, it aligns with our survey, right? So we now have 40,000 respondents worldwide, but the top line is that everybody, or 78%, says, okay, my home environment enables me to work productively, right? And if you compare that to the work environment or to the office environment, there the percentage is a lot lower, around 63%. So on the surface, it looks like everybody can be productive at home. And if you then dig a little bit deeper, you see that technically it's all fine. But the things people struggle with is work-life balance, connection to the organization, connection to the team. So I like the fact that Flemish government says, okay, you are allowed to work from home 2 or 3 days, because what we also see, if you slice and dice the data a bit further, is that some people struggle more with the working from home situation than others. So for example, younger people, which want to learn from others, they struggle more than older people. We have some, if you look at it from case by case, from company by company, we see that legal teams struggle, marketing teams struggle, and probably that has to do that legal is high intellectual work, and they want to learn from each other, hear things, etc. And marketing is more innovation, creativity, etc. So that also touches upon the point of John, I think. And but we think it's not a binary discussion, right? Or it's either the office or it's home. Because if you also look at the activities which are better supported at home, it's mostly conversations. Yep. Because there are a lot of open offices and you're not being disturbed by your neighbor, so to say. And things which are better supported in the office are, for example, social interaction and learning from others. But you have to be careful with drawing conclusions from that you say, okay, all the concentration can be at home. And we do all the social interaction and the meeting and greeting in the office, because that's not how a normal day in the office looks like. You know, you have maybe a meeting for most of us. You have maybe a meeting of 1 hour. And then the 10 minutes after that meeting, that's probably where the innovation happens. And maybe 1 hour after that, you want to sit down and do some concentration work. So I think to your very first question, okay, is the workspace, is that going to change? I think maybe not the square meters, because you have different trends going up, going down, but the mix might as well be changing. Yeah. But it's too early stage. I would say we are 12 weeks into this lockdown or semi-lockdown. You know, so I think it's very early stage to already draw conclusions and say, okay, things like which Facebook mentioned, like 50% of our workforce will work remotely. I think everybody, depending on your role in the short term, depending on your travel to work, has a physical minimum that they would like to come into the office.
Yeah. That aligns with what John mentioned as well. And I think from a leadership perspective, John, there is obviously still there are quite few challenges still, and there is a great unknown. But there's a question I got for you and for Steven, because a lot of publications over the last couple of weeks were about digital transformation, the acceleration on digital. There was an article in Forbes on the 19th of May, an article and interview with Anna Katrina Seletsky, who said manufacturer experience went in 5 years, innovation were pushed forward now for the next 18 months. So we're going to do what we usually would take 5 years in 18 months coming. Is that something that John, from your perspective with Telenet and what you guys do, see happening as well? And Steve, on a larger scale, I know you go to the Far East a lot, to China, to South Korea. Is that something you guys can relate to, that you can see happening within your company and your experience? We start maybe John.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the raw statistics on the acceleration of digital maturity in our footprint are pretty astounding. By the end of April, we had downloaded the same amount of bits and bytes as we did for the full year of 2019. You know, basically the networks are running at, 90% of peak capacity all day long, whereas before they were scaled to do it, at between 7 and 9 p.m. So just in terms of the amount of bandwidth required, it's clear that people are using more and more devices and applications in the edge, and they're moving a lot more data around. The average speed of utilized in a Telenet household is over 200 megabits per second. It was 140 6 months ago. So it is from that standpoint accelerating. We're also seeing very quick adaptation to e-commerce platforms. We're providing a lot of support in that area. I mean, everybody's got an anecdotal story about how their 85-year-old mother is now on Instagram and WhatsApp and Zooming the grandchildren. I think it's without exception the new normal, and it's busting out of this sort of generational segmentation that digital has had, for the last few years. So it's really spreading across the whole universe. So I think it's definitely a trend. I think how we manage it and how we balance it in our lives and in work are going to become very important. And I think, there's potentially a backlash here. I can tell you one thing that doesn't work in our company is some people working digitally and remotely and some people physically present. It just, there's too much confusion. There's, the trust breaks down because, you're not getting the visual cues. You're not having the the human component of how people accelerate, plans and ideas. So that's something that we've sort of stumbled into over the last few weeks. So how do we adapt to this new digital intensity, I guess, is going to become a very important feature over the next few months as we all get back to something different.
Yeah, well, I think that we need a framework for the home working, so that there are clear rules. You can work these days from home or not, and certain meetings or events you should be present physically, so that we keep the culture aspect that John talked about is very important. So that an employee cannot say, I almost never come in, that we have certain touch points, that it's clear when you have to be present, when not, what is expected, and not only come in for the meeting and then leave after, so that we, as a company, as employers, force a bit the social interaction.
Yeah. And
it has to be also at the peer level. I think people have to hold each other accountable, because
that's a good point.
You can't do it from a command and control standpoint. If a particular team or squad or tribe or whatever is got a certain event, people can't just choose to stay at home and half stay at home and half come in the office and do it. So peer pressure is going to be important, and once again, I think that's going to accelerate the flattening of the organizational hierarchy as well, because it's very hard to run command and control over the video. Yeah.
Steven, what's your perspective on that? And again, I would like to make the link between the whole digital transformation, and it's been said a couple of times, digitally everything works fine, but there's a human component. And then I would like to make the little step to user and customer experience again, because whether you like it or not, your employees, they do have a certain experience with their employer, with the office they work in, the encounters they have in the office with whether it's clients or suppliers. How do you see that in not just a Benelux perspective, but also in a global perspective? But I can imagine there's a difference between the Far East and Europe.
There's absolutely a big difference. I think that all of us have been looking at Asian markets and more in particular China to witness in the last few years that they were ahead of us in terms of digital convenience and e-commerce, mobile commerce. If you look back, there was a tipping point for them when the previous SARS virus was spreading in Asian markets. That was the moment that many people started to change their behaviors, not just with mouth masks, but also with mobile ordering, and trying to limit the touchy part of society. Yeah, when you're afraid, you don't want to touch so many things. So in many Asian markets, you're starting to see a retail environment where people are just trying to remove all physical aspects from that relationship. It's like we have in the US with Amazon Go, where you walk in, you take what you want from a store and you walk out. Those kind of concepts, we see them in Asia as well. I think they will be scaled more and more, because it's not just a convenient concept, it's also a very safe concept to shop right now. So I think as a conclusion that, Asian markets have taken a sprint 8 years ago and they're ahead of us. The rest of the world is now taking the same sprint, and I'm convinced that this will boost all kind of new concepts for customers with less touch, more convenience than ever before. And if you link that back to an employer, we're going to expect the same kind of things. You don't want your employee to have the feeling that they walk into a time machine and that they go back to 1990 when they walk into your office. You want to make sure that the same, high standards in terms of how the world functions, that you can offer that as an employer to your employees. So I think we're going to see a boost in expectations there, that there might become some sort of a zero tolerance towards digital failures. I have the feeling that digital convenience was the cause of growth of many organizations in the last 10 years. I think today we've reached some sort of a new minimum maturity there, that if you have that's seen as the most normal thing in the world. If you don't have it, you're going to have some serious issues in the next few years. And I think that mentality will mirror back to employers.
Yeah. Before I go to Roel and Pia on what they did together in a partnership, I would like to ask a question to Christophe as well. Christoph, the finance and auditing are considered to be more conservative. I know you well. I know you're not conservative. You're more progressive. But from a field perspective, from the industry, what's the general look? Let's say for Grant Thornton, how do you perceive the foreseeable future? What's going to change, possibly within Grant Thornton in the way of working and for your staff?
Yep. So there's two answers. One would be for Grant Thornton. Two would be for CFOs that are working for me or myself for SMEs and sized companies. I mean, for Grant Thornton, I mean it's not new to mention that obviously finance, or the transactional part of finance, is going to move to robotics, or has already moved, or should move to robotics. So that part in digitalization has started years ago. Audit and purely accounting. If you look at, I think it was the 2020 version of Robert Half of what are the top 5 most asked profiles today. It's still all transactional based. It's an accounts payable clerk. It's an accounts receivable clerk. It's a chef comptable. So there's a big gap in what Steve is mentioning on the digital side of my business, and what is still currently out there. I think there's a giant leap to still be taken by the SME companies, and that's the same what I see when I work at the companies, or my colleagues are as a CFO today. There's no need anymore for what you'd call the old-fashioned or the analytical CFO. Those days are gone. I mean, every CFO or finance manager, or whatever you call the animal, I'm fair, they need to know the basics, and they need to understand the numbers. They need to be able to go to the board and tell them how the numbers look like. But along comes COVID, and they're helpless. So the next, the second CFO could be then what you call strategic CFO, who actually understands the numbers and at the same time feels that how the company can grow or could continue to grow. So he feels the operations, he feels the market, he feels the customers. You can put them in front of a customer at the same time with workforce, at the same time with a supplier. He will move forward. He will help move the business forward. I think that strategic CFO definitely has a place and has had a place in the recent years. But again, constantly what I miss in those profiles today, and what the SMEs are looking for, is that strategic CFO with the tech side along, so that they can translate what their needs into a new, is it a software, is it FAS, is it SaaS, is it CaaS, whatever, in the cloud or a platform. You need to be able to articulate that and fully understand that tech part to, just be ready for what's next. Perhaps it's COVID, perhaps it's something else. Yeah. We don't know the best practices, not from the people aspect yet, not from CFO yet, not from, it's still yet to be invented or defined. But, I think leadership, whether CFO, HROs, CEOs, for COVID, having experience for 20 or 30 years, having the knowledge, being able to read something, that has been a nice part to have in your backpack. I think going forward, the capability of mixing all those things together, looking forward and articulating that back to all levels in the company, that's where the kind of older fashioned way of managing will defer to what's new and what should actually be in a leadership position and leadership role be booked into.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. I think it's a clear viewpoint and a good statement. I would like to go to Roel and Pia, because obviously Bridgestone has started a activity-based working project. How is that going to be affected or impacted by the whole COVID episode? And Roel, you must have been really excited when I said that Bart Somers announced that he would promote activity-based working in the Belgian government or the Flemish government. I have to be careful what I say with Belgian or Flemish government, but you must be excited with that. I also know that Telenet, for instance, they have activity-based working projects as well. So what's your experience with that and working together with Pia, or Pia working together with Roel? Now, how's that going to translate into the post-COVID period?
Yeah, I will leave the last word to Pia. But to wrap things up and to bridge things, I would be curious if the Belgian government want to take the step from activity-based as a, let's say, an office concept to a way of working. So the first thing, the office concept, that is what they already did the last, let's say, 5 years. But I would argue and would be curious if they are ready to take that next step. And to take the bridge, an organization is a beast, right? And we're talking about hybrid models, about this is what we need, these are the solutions. But I think that an organization is always a combination of, let's say, creative processes, repetitive processes, so standard processes. It's a combination of human interest, of, let's say, the organization interest, of productivity, of cost, of all these kind of things. And there is an urgent need to look at the organization as a combination of interest and processes that, let's say, are focused on clients. And from that, let's say, basic standpoint, look at the possibilities of remote working, of being present at the office, about, let's say, raising the level of HR services, of IT services, etc., and of hospitality. So I think that there is an urgent need to go to a new frame, a new concept, a new, let's say, statement about cultural responsibilities or possibilities. And that's what we did or are doing within Bridgestone too. So Pia.
No, what I think is so indeed we, just to recap, we had a survey among the employees. I think that's important, how because there was indeed a need that we identify need. There was, probably an issue with the capacity of the building, but also, how people were perceiving. But I think the outcome, and Roel, you will agree, I think, to that, it's interesting that some of the elements that came out of our, let's say, the feedback that the employees provided us was the aspect of effective collaboration and the interaction with people. This is actually what we are finding back, I think today, with the home working, being everybody at home. So that was one really of the element, how we can improve effective collaboration and this social networking between the employees. But that was also the culture aspect, which was also flagged, how we can actually create and strengthen this culture and make sure that we all, live through that culture. That was the other element. And the aspect of IT, which is the digital world we need the digital support. So actually, when I'm listening to all the discussion of today, those three elements were flagged. And this is something that we will need to even integrate more into our workshop that will actually soon start. But it's interesting to see this parallel, what we got as a result and all the feedback that we talked today, which is this element. And I like this element of human, because despite this digital world in which we are, the human aspect, okay, I'm HR, but as a person, I think it's interesting that this human aspect is actually even stronger today. That's my perception maybe, but it's really something we need to go through, and having this element into all the conversation while living in the world we are. I think this is great, but it's a work in progress with Roel indeed. But the COVID has, I would say, probably accelerated, or will certainly be part of even stronger the discussion on the workshop we're going to have with the executive committee to start with, and with the employees. Yeah. So, but it's interesting parallel, I would say. Roel, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I
but,
totally agree on that. But let's not forget that this is only, let's say, the talk about the impact of COVID, and it's striking to see the parallel between the, let's say, last year's measurement and the situation now.
Has changed.
But I think that, yeah, I think that there is a new component to that discussion, and that's equality. So let's not forget that we are now in the time that we are broadly discussing racism, etc. And I think that will be a component to include in that discussion or that conversation as well.
Helaas, we have to round up the seminar because otherwise we're going to go over time. But as a conclusion, if I may, because I heard a lot of really interesting viewpoints and a lot of agreement, not throughout the whole line, but a lot of agreement. But what I see is a massive amount of opportunities, because as we go along, everybody's still filling in the blanks. Government is making up stuff as we go along because it's a very unmatched situation. Nobody has had to face this in modern times at the situation we're in at the moment. And it forced a lot of companies and people in general to behave in a different way. So I think for all of us, it offers a lot of opportunities. I think you need to keep an open mind. What I heard, especially from John saying in the leadership, we can't go overboard on the extremes. You know, there's always a middle part, and as a leader, you should be strong and keep everything into account and everybody into account, and put down a nice structure. If you don't agree, just say no, John. That's not what I said. And I look at Steve as saying, you know, the digital transformation is there to stay, and we need to act. And again, that goes to leadership and activity-based working, or you know, change in robotics, as Christophe touched. That's all nice, and it will happen, but in a certain framework under strong leadership again. So I think leadership and making the right decision as it comes along will be the biggest point. Do you have anything to add or conclude?
I'd just like to support what you just said, Guy, because and what both the Bridgestone guys said, that I think we should be optimistic, because at an existential level, the big winners of the last 3 months are trust, empathy, generosity, and respect. And I think you can see, you know, the explosions, what's happened around the world since the murder of George Floyd in America, is that, you know, people are ready for a change. They're ready. This is an inflection point. And hopefully we can keep it going, and you know, humankind can be the winner. So, you know, I'm pretty optimistic on that front, and I support what you just said.
And that's up to us, right?
Yes, as leaders, and all of us, I guess.
All of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else like to?
I hope the recovery is going to be V-shaped and not W-shaped.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Steven, maybe for you a closing statement or?
Well, I thought it was really interesting to hear all the different perspectives, but I'm also optimistic, like John said. I think that, you know, you have the digital part, which is convenience. You have the more empathy and the human part, but there's also about how can we add value to society. And consumers expect that from organizations. They look to business leaders to make a difference more than they trust governments. And every organization has impact on society in multiple ways. And if we can, you know, have a positive voice there and show some real dedication and commitment, I think it could be a very beautiful years ahead of us if we all take our responsibility there.
I think that's a very nice closing statement. I would like to end this seminar by obviously thanking all the participants and all the people in the panel. Thank you for your input. It was enormously interesting, and we're going to put everything together into a white paper that we'll provide to all the participants in the seminar. It has been recorded, so we can take notes and get some quotes out of it. We'll send on our paper to all the panel members. So thanks again for your input. I would also like to say to all the participants that we're going to send on a thank you email with some extra information on whatever was being said. I think Gideon, it might be interesting to share some of your insights and some of the numbers that you put together, and then maybe we can share that with our audience. And it's a bit on the slide, but I also would like to say that in the thank you email there will be like a pre-order code for Stephen's new book. Stephen is publishing a new book on customer experience and everything that goes with it. So people who would like to sign in on that, feel free to do so in the thank you email. And again, thank you for the panel for joining. I feel like we could have stayed in this talk for another 4 hours and discuss furthermore or other issues, but alas, our 1 hour time has passed. There was no Q&A either because it was too interesting, but maybe for the next time. So I'd like to thank you all again for being here.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.